Life after sport can be a real problem for some elite athletes, and even while they're involved in competitive sport, the pressures of that can also cause enormous problems. There's a conference going on this week of Australian psychologists, academics and healthcare professionals looking at the scientific causes for drug and alcohol addiction, and in particular they're looking at why some athletes turn to drugs and alcohol abuse. I'm going to talk to psychologist Cameron Brown. Cameron is Australian-based, but he specialises in aftercare support for return clients from the Cabin Chiang Mai, which is a leading drug and alcohol rehabilitation facility in Thailand. Cameron joins us now. G'day, Cameron.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thanks. So is the focus of your interest this week going to be on athletes and the problems that they can encounter?
Yes, absolutely. Very much based on addiction, both during and after sporting careers.
So what happened? Let's look at after sport. Is there evidence that this is a particular problem?
Yeah, what we're seeing, a lot of sports people, Ian Thorpe being the most recent, not necessarily in relation to addiction, but more in relation to mental health, coming out talking about their struggles during their sporting careers, and from many other people like Ben Cousins, that this is a big issue in sport, pre and post-retirement.
Is there anything to do with what they're doing in terms of their exertions and the way they operate and train during their sporting careers that might make them susceptible?
Absolutely. Obviously, neurochemicals in the brain increasing with excess exercise, and this happens as well with. So that it's an absolute crossover, but there is that potential for sports people to seek outside excitation, I suppose, in order to review the old feelings that they've had, as well as the big social component as well, the adoration of fans and all those kinds of things. Trying to recapture those after they've finished their playing career can be a very hard thing.
So that emotional high that they get from sporting success or any sort of achievement in sport, that the brain reacts to that in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what we call the reward pathway, and the reward pathway works on anything that's rewarding. And when we look at athletes, they have an exceptionally rewarding career, big rewards in terms of sporting achievement, adoration of fans. And also physical rewards from being so fit and healthy, obviously. So that reward system also translates over into reward from drugs and alcohol as well.
So is that so-called dopamine effect, is it?
Yeah, dopamine, absolutely.
So when they're not getting it, they crave it in other ways? Yeah,
absolutely. And for the vast majority of people, that reward system is relatively stable and intact. But for people who may be predisposed to addiction, that dopamine, that reward system in the brain will seek out further excitation.
So can you prepare athletes for the fact that they may well be at risk when their career is over, or even during their career?
Yeah, absolutely. Education is a key in this, both the education of individuals on addiction and drug use, but also education for sporting clubs and bodies to recognise what the effects are of different drugs on the individual, and to make sure that I suppose the culture of drinking and using drugs isn't necessarily instilled in any individual club, because that tends to have a knock-on effect for someone who might be predisposed for addiction, is that they have a social outlet where they are able to use.
So sporting clubs, elite sporting clubs like AFL teams, etc., would be aware of this phenomenon and would be actively counselling young sportsmen about the problems that may lie ahead?
Well, I'm not necessarily sure whether they're 100% aware, but definitely the education component is starting to come on board. What we know from work at the cabin is that sometimes people don't necessarily have that support from their sporting clubs or managers, because simply people don't understand addiction. In the talk I did today, that there's a big misunderstanding of what addiction is and how it affects people. People tend to think that it's maybe something, I suppose, these stereotypical ideas of the alcoholic or the addict that we have aren't necessarily always true.
So much of the focus on bad behaviour, if that's the right term for it, by elite sportsmen goes around illicit drugs, cocaine, amphetamines, etc., etc. There doesn't seem to be, other than when they go out for a night on the tear, such a focus on alcohol. Is alcohol as much of an addiction problem, or can it be, for these sportsmen as those illicit drugs?
Absolutely, because alcohol is something that can be used during competition, well, not necessarily, obviously, directly in competition, but between games, it's socially acceptable. People are able to drink, and the more we see people who do have predispositions or addictions drinking and exposed to alcohol, then the more likely the effects are going to be greater later on in their career. Good
to talk to you, Cameron. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Cameron Brown, a specialist addiction psychologist. He's come out of that meeting today where he delivered a paper this morning just to talk to us about that. 9211